She was alone, desperate, and running out of time. He had nothing left but his daughters and his pride. In 1865 Kansas, their worlds collided at a labor auction, and what happened next defied every expectation. This story isn't just about survival, it's about what happens when two broken paths dare to cross. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like this story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Kansas wind howled across the barren plains as Sarah Miller stood on the porch of her farmhouse, her black mourning dress fluttering against her thin frame. 6 months had passed since influenza took her husband James, leaving her alone with a sprawling wheat farm too vast for one pair of hands. At 32, Sarah's once vibrant blue eyes now carried the weight of solitude and uncertainty. "Mrs. Miller, you must consider your options," Mr. Peterson, the banker, had told her just yesterday. "A woman alone cannot manage these acres. You'll lose everything by winter's end." Sarah knew he was right, though his eagerness to foreclose on her property hadn't escaped her notice. The war had ended and the nation was healing, but here in Kansas, life remained unforgiving. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Sarah harnessed her wagon and headed toward town. The weekly labor auction would be her last hope. With the meager savings James had left, she could perhaps hire help, temporary as it might be. Leavenworth was bustling that morning. Soldiers, settlers, and traders filled the streets. Sarah pulled her wagon to the edge of the gathering crowd where the labor auction was beginning. Most workers were former soldiers, drifters, or immigrants seeking opportunity in the West. $5 for 2 weeks' labor, the auctioneer called out, pointing to a young European immigrant. Sarah watched as men were hired one by one, prices climbing beyond her means. Just as she was about to leave, the crowd parted for a new group. A tall Native American man stood straight-backed despite the chains around his wrists. Behind him, 5 young women, clearly his daughters, huddled together, their expressions a mixture of fear and defiance. "Cherokee workers," the auctioneer announced. "Strong man, good with horses and farming. 5 daughters who can cook, clean, and sew. Displaced from their lands. Contract labor only, not for permanent ownership, as the government regulations state." Sarah studied them carefully. The man's weathered face betrayed no emotion, but his eyes held a quiet dignity. His daughters, ranging from perhaps 12 to 20, bore his same proud stance despite their circumstances. The bidding began sluggishly. Many settlers harbored prejudice against Native Americans, and the idea of housing 6 of them caused hesitation. Sarah calculated quickly. The remaining money in her purse might be just enough. $15 for 2 months' labor, she called out, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. The auctioneer looked surprised. "The lady bids $15. Any other offers?" Silence fell across the crowd. Some men snickered, others shook their heads. "Sold to the widow in black," the auctioneer declared, already moving on to the next group of laborers. Sarah approached the clerk's table, paid her money, and signed the labor contract. The native man and his daughters were led to her wagon, their chains removed. "My name is Sarah Miller," she said, looking directly at the man. "I have a farm 5 miles east of town." For a long moment he said nothing, merely studying her face. Finally he nodded. "I am called Eagle Feather. These are my daughters, Morning Star, Willow, Dove, Little Creek, and Running Deer." Each girl nodded slightly as her name was spoken. The oldest, Morning Star, regarded Sarah with evident suspicion. "I cannot promise much beyond shelter and food," Sarah admitted as they climbed onto the wagon. "But you'll be treated fairly on my land." Eagle Feather helped his daughters into the wagon bed before climbing up beside Sarah. "We will work," he said simply. "We need no promises." As they rode away from town, Sarah felt the stares of townspeople following them. She had just made herself the subject of gossip throughout the county. A white widow taking in a Cherokee family. Unheard of. But necessity had forced her hand, and something in Eagle Feather's dignified silence told her she had made the right choice. The eldest daughter, Morning Star, spoke suddenly from the wagon bed. Why did you choose us, white woman? Others would have worked for less. Sarah turned slightly. Because I saw strength in your father's eyes, and in yours. My farm needs strength now more than it needs anything else. Eagle Feather glanced at her, something like respect flickering across his features. As they approached the Miller farm, Sarah felt a strange sensation. For the first time since James's death, she was not returning to an empty home. Whether this arrangement would save her farm remained to be seen, but for today, the crushing solitude had lifted. It's not much, she said as the weathered farmhouse came into view, but it's home. Eagle Feather nodded, taking in the fields of wheat, the small orchard, the barn in need of repair. It is good land, he said quietly. It will yield if treated with respect. Something in his words touched Sarah deeply. She had thought only of survival these past months, not of the connection to the land that had once brought her and James such joy. Perhaps these strangers might help her rediscover that bond, even as they helped her save what remained of her life here on the Kansas prairie. The first weeks passed in a rhythm of cautious cooperation. Eagle Feather proved himself an exceptional worker, rising before dawn to tend the fields while his daughters divided household duties efficiently. Sarah found herself both impressed and slightly unsettled by how quickly they adapted to her farm. Morning Star, at 20, managed the household with quiet authority. Willow, 18, proved gifted with the chickens and garden. 17-year-old Dove took charge of cooking, while Little Creek, 15, and Running Deer, 12, helped wherever needed. Their collective industry was transforming the neglected farm with remarkable speed. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset, Eagle Feather approached. He had been mending fences all day, his copper skin glistening with honest sweat. The north field is ready for planting, he said, settling on the steps near her. Tomorrow we should begin. Sarah nodded. I've noticed how you test the soil with your hands before deciding what to plant where. James never did that. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. My people have farmed these plains for many generations. The earth speaks, if you know how to listen. Will you teach me to listen? The question surprised Sarah as much as it seemed to surprise him. After a pause, he nodded. It would be good for the land if you learned its voice. Inside, the daughters were preparing dinner. Through the window, Sarah could see them working together, their movements graceful and synchronized. They still kept a careful distance from her, speaking Cherokee among themselves, switching to English only when addressing her directly. Your daughters are remarkable women, Sarah observed. Their mother must have been very proud. Eagle Feather's expression darkened. Their mother, White Dove, died when soldiers drove us from our home in the Cherokee Nation. Running Deer was just 7 winters old then. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward his, then stopped. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? There was no accusation in his voice, merely acknowledgement. We walked many miles after that, worked many farms. Then the war came, and work became scarce. Sarah hesitated before asking, how did you come to be at that auction? I thought such practices were ending with the war. They call it contract labor now, he explained, his deep voice tinged with bitterness. Not slavery, they say, though the chains feel the same. We were working a farm near Lawrence when the owner died. His son had no use for us but needed money, so to the auction we went. The injustice of it tightened Sarah's throat. That won't happen here, she promised. When our contract ends, you'll be free to go, or to stay on fair terms if you wish. Eagle Feather studied her face as if searching for deception. Finding none, he nodded slowly. The next morning, Sarah joined Eagle Feather in the north field. He knelt, showing her how to crumble the soil between her fingers. Feel the moisture, he instructed. Not too wet, not too dry. Perfect for corn here, wheat there. His large hand covered hers, guiding her fingers through the earth. Sarah felt a strange flutter in her chest at the contact. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Morning Star watching them from the edge of the field, her expression unreadable. Later that day, as Sarah helped Dove prepare dinner, the young woman suddenly spoke. My father smiles more now. Sarah glanced up, surprised by the observation. Does he? Dove nodded, her hands continuing to knead dough. Not with his mouth, but with his eyes. We have not seen this since before our mother died. Unsure how to respond, Sarah simply said, "He's a good man." "You all are good people." "The people in town do not think so," Dove replied matter-of-factly. "Yesterday when Willow and I went for supplies, they would not serve us until we said we worked for you." Sarah felt a flush of anger. "Next time I'll go with you." "That would make it worse," Morningstar said, entering the kitchen. "They already talk about you taking in Indians. If you defend us too strongly, they will think." She didn't finish, but Sarah understood. The boundaries between them weren't just about employer and workers. They were the harsh realities of a world that saw them as fundamentally different. That evening, a spring storm rolled across the plains. Thunder shook the small farmhouse as rain lashed against the windows. Little Creek and Running Deer huddled together, trying not to show their fear. "When I was a girl," Sarah said, addressing the sisters, "my mother would tell stories during storms. Would you like to hear one?" The younger girls nodded eagerly, while the older sisters exchanged glances but drew closer. As Sarah began a tale about a brave frontier woman who befriended a family of wolves, she noticed Eagle Feather listening intently from his corner. By the time she finished, Running Deer had fallen asleep against her father's shoulder, and the others were smiling. "Your turn," Sarah said. "Will you share one of your stories?" After a moment's hesitation, Eagle Feather began speaking in a rhythmic tone, telling the tale of how the stars came to be in the sky. His daughters joined in at certain parts, their voices creating a harmony that filled the small room, and somehow made the storm outside seem less threatening. Sarah felt something shift that night, a tentative bridge forming across the divide that separated them. As different as their worlds were, here in this farmhouse, they had created a temporary refuge from judgment and hardship. Whether it could last beyond their contract remained uncertain, but for now, it was enough. By late June, the Kansas heat bore down mercilessly on the farm. The wheat fields shimmered golden under the relentless sun, almost ready for harvest. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow as she pumped water into a bucket. From this vantage point, she could see Eagle Feather repairing the barn roof, his movements precise despite the oppressive temperature. 3 months had passed since the auction. Their original contract was nearing its end, a fact that had begun to weigh heavily on Sarah's mind. The farm was thriving under their collective care. More importantly, the house had become a home again, filled with the sounds of conversation and occasional laughter. The thought of returning to solitude made her chest tighten with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. "Mrs. Miller." The voice startled her from her thoughts. Sheriff Dawson rode up the path, his expression grim beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Sheriff," Sarah acknowledged, setting down her bucket. "What brings you out this way?" He dismounted, glancing toward the barn where Eagle Feather had paused in his work. "Got some complaints from town folk, concerned about your situation here." Sarah's spine stiffened. "My situation is a private business matter. These people are contracted workers helping me save my farm. That contract's nearly up, isn't it?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Peterson at the bank says you're planning to extend it. Says you've been too friendly with these Indians. Not proper for a widow woman alone." "Mr. Peterson is remarkably well informed about matters that don't concern him," Sarah replied coldly. "As for propriety, I believe that's between me and the Lord." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Just delivering a friendly warning, Mrs. Miller. Folks are talking. Might be better for everyone if these people moved on once your contract ends." Eagle Feather had descended from the roof and now stood a respectful distance away, his face impassive but his eyes alert. "Thank you for your concern, Sheriff," Sarah said firmly. "Now if you'll excuse me, we have work to finish before sundown." After the sheriff departed, Eagle Feather approached. "He brings trouble," he observed quietly. "Nothing we can't handle," Sarah assured him, though uncertainty gnawed at her. People fear what they don't understand. That evening, Sarah called the family together in the kitchen. The daughters exchanged nervous glances, clearly having noticed the sheriff's visit. "Our contract ends next week," Sarah began. I want to offer all of you permanent positions here, fair wages, not just room and board. This farm is succeeding because of your knowledge and hard work. I'd like that to continue." A moment of silence followed. Finally, Morning Star spoke. "The townspeople will not accept this. They will make trouble for you." "Probably," Sarah admitted. "But this is my land, and I choose who works it." Eagle Feather studied her face. "Why would you invite such difficulty? You could hire others who would not bring you this trouble." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Because no one else would care for this land as you do. Because my home hasn't felt like a home since James died, until all of you arrived." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Because I've come to care about what happens to you." Something shifted in Eagle Feather's expression, a softening around his eyes. "We will consider your offer," he said. Later that night, Sarah overheard the family discussing in hushed Cherokee voices on the porch. Though she couldn't understand the words, the emotional tones were clear: concern, disagreement, hope. The next morning, Eagle Feather found Sarah in the orchard. "My daughters and I have talked through the night," he said. "The younger ones wish to stay. They have come to see this place as home. Morning Star fears for our safety if we remain." "And you?" Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. "What do you wish?" He looked out across the fields before answering. "I have not felt peace since we were driven from our ancestral lands. But here ... He gestured toward the farm. "Here, the earth speaks to me again. I would stay, if you are certain." "I am," Sarah said, surprised by the strength of her conviction. That afternoon, a wagon approached carrying Mr. Peterson from the bank, accompanied by Reverend Clark from the town church. Sarah met them in the yard, her stance resolute. "Mrs. Miller," Peterson began without preamble, "I've come to discuss the mortgage on your property. Given recent ... concerns about your domestic arrangements, the bank is reconsidering the terms of your loan." "My payments have been prompt, Mr. Peterson," Sarah replied evenly. "The farm is more productive now than it's been in years." "Be that as it may," the Reverend interjected, "there are moral considerations. A Christian widow living with a heathen man and his daughters, it sets a troubling example." Sarah felt anger rise in her throat. "Reverend, these people have shown more Christian charity than many who sit in your pews every Sunday. They've helped me rebuild my life when no one else would." "Sarah," Peterson's voice turned condescending, "be reasonable. We can find you proper help, good Christian men from town. Send these Indians on their way, and all this unpleasantness can be forgotten." From the corner of her eye, Sarah saw Eagle Feather and his daughters watching from the porch, their faces carefully composed. "My decision is made," she stated firmly. "This is my property, my business, and my choice of workers. Unless you're prepared to call my loan due immediately, which we both know would be legally questionable, I suggest you return to town." Peterson's face reddened. "You'll regret this stubbornness, Mrs. Miller. Good day to you." He turned his wagon sharply, the Reverend casting a disapproving glance backward as they departed. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the yard, Eagle Feather joined Sarah on the porch steps. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. "They will not stop," he finally said. "Men like that never do." "Then we'll face them together," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the ease of saying, "we." This farm has weathered drought, flood, and war. It can weather small-minded gossip, too. Eagle Feather turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the sunset. "Sarah," he said, using her given name for the first time, "my people believe that paths cross for a reason. Perhaps the Great Spirit led us to your auction that day." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "Perhaps," she agreed softly. As their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing slowly, quietly, like the wheat in their fields. Behind them, inside the house, Dove began singing a Cherokee lullaby as she prepared dinner, her clear voice carrying on the evening breeze. For this moment at least, the troubles of town seemed distant and insignificant compared to the peace they had found together. The harvest moon hung low and golden over the farmhouse, as Sarah and Eagle Feather worked side by side, stacking the last sheaves of wheat. The successful harvest represented not just their physical labor, but the merging of their agricultural knowledge, his ancestral understanding of the land combined with her years of frontier farming experience. 4 months had passed since their confrontation with Peterson and the Reverend. Though the family had officially stayed on as paid workers, their relationship had evolved into something far more complex. They had become a family of sorts, bound not by blood, but by shared purpose and growing affection. "The last bundle," Eagle Feather announced, lifting it onto the stack. In the moonlight, Sarah could see satisfaction in his face. "The best harvest this land has seen in many seasons." "We did it together," Sarah replied, removing her gloves. "All of us." The distant sound of approaching horses interrupted their moment of accomplishment. Sarah squinted into the darkness, recognizing Sheriff Dawson's silhouette leading several mounted men. "Stay here," Eagle Feather said quietly to his daughters, who had emerged from the house at the sound. "Sarah and I will speak with them." The riders stopped in the yard, some holding torches that cast ominous shadows across their grim faces. Sarah counted 8 men in total, including Peterson and several farmers from neighboring properties. "Evening, Mrs. Miller," Sheriff Dawson said, his tone falsely cordial. "We've come to have a word about your continued arrangement here." Sarah stepped forward, conscious of Eagle Feather's protective presence beside her. "Sheriff, we've already discussed this. My workers are legally employed. There's nothing more to say." Peterson dismounted, his face flushed with either whiskey or anger, possibly both. "That was before we received word about your true relationship with this savage. Reverend Clark saw you two together on the porch swing last Sunday evening, sitting closer than any decent employer would with a hired hand." Murmurs rippled through the mounted men. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she stood her ground. "My personal life is not the town's concern, Mr. Peterson. It is when it threatens the moral fabric of our community," one of the farmers called out. "We won't stand for a white woman and an Indian living as careful." Eagle Feather interrupted, his deep voice cutting through the night air. "Choose your next words with respect." The atmosphere tensed immediately, hands moving toward weapons. Sarah stepped between the groups, heart pounding. "There will be no violence on my land. State your business and be done with it." Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Miller, we're giving you a choice. Either your Indian workers leave by week's end, or the bank forecloses on your mortgage and you all leave." "You can't do that," Sarah protested. "My payments are current." Peterson smirked. "Actually, we can. There's a moral character clause in your husband's original loan agreement. The bank board voted this afternoon to invoke it, given your improper domestic situation." From the porch, Morning Star suddenly called out, "Father!" Riders coming from the east. All heads turned to see 3 more horsemen approaching rapidly. As they drew closer, Sarah recognized Thomas Abernathy, her late husband's lawyer from Topeka, alongside 2 other men. "Impeccable timing, Tom," Sarah called out, relief washing over her. Abernathy dismounted, nodding respectfully to Sarah and Eagle Feather before addressing the group. "Gentlemen, I received Mrs. Miller's telegram yesterday. I understand there's some dispute about her farm mortgage." Peterson straightened his vest. "This is a private bank matter, Abernathy. No concern of yours." "On the contrary," the lawyer replied, producing documents from his saddlebag. "I represent Mrs. Miller's legal interests, and I've brought copies of her mortgage agreement for everyone's reference. Interestingly, there's no moral character clause as you claimed." A murmur of confusion spread through the mounted men. Peterson's face reddened further. "Furthermore," Abernathy continued, "I've brought with me Mr. Ellsworth from the Federal Indian Affairs Office and Captain Reynolds from Fort Leavenworth. They're quite interested in your treatment of legally contracted Cherokee workers." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Now see here, we're just concerned citizens. Threatening a property owner and attempting fraudulent foreclosure goes well beyond concerned citizens." Captain Reynolds interjected. "The war may be over, gentlemen, but federal law still applies in Kansas Territory." Eagle Feather stood tall beside Sarah, his presence steady and unwavering. "We wish no trouble," he said calmly. "We only wish to live and work in peace." The federal agent, Ellsworth, stepped forward. "These Cherokee have legal work permits and are under federal protection following their displacement during the war. Any harassment of them will be investigated as a federal offense." Peterson sputtered. "This is outrageous." "This woman is living in sin with Mr. Peterson," Abernathy cut in sharply. "Unless you have evidence of any laws being broken, I suggest you and your posse depart immediately. Otherwise, my colleagues here will be forced to take official notice of your actions tonight." After several tense moments, Sheriff Dawson motioned to his companions. "We'll go for now." "But this ain't finished, Mrs. Miller." As the town contingent rode away, Sarah turned to Abernathy with grateful eyes. "Thank you, Tom. Your telegram said you'd come, but I didn't expect such thorough reinforcements." The lawyer smiled. "James was my friend. I wasn't about to let his widow be bullied by small-town tyrants." He glanced at Eagle Feather with open curiosity. "Though I admit, your situation here is unconventional." Later that evening, after the federal men had departed with promises of continued protection, Sarah and Eagle Feather sat alone on the porch steps. Inside, his daughters were preparing for bed, their voices soft murmurs through the open window. "They will return," Eagle Feather said quietly. "Perhaps not with torches, but their minds are set against us." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the truth of his words. "Yes, but we're stronger together than apart." After a pause, she added, "Peterson wasn't entirely wrong, was he?" "About us?" Eagle Feather turned to face her fully, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "No, he was not wrong about my feelings, but he was wrong to think them shameful." Sarah took his weathered hand in hers. "In town, they see only differences between us. But here, on this land, I've come to see how much we share our love for this farm. For your daughters, for the life we're building." "My people have a saying," Eagle Feather replied, his thumb gently tracing circles on her palm. "The path is made by walking it. We cannot know where our path leads, but we can choose to walk it with courage. And together," Sarah added softly. As autumn's first cool breeze rustled through the wheat fields, Sarah leaned her head against Eagle Feather's shoulder. The future held uncertainty. Prejudice would not disappear overnight, and the road ahead would not be easy. But on this night, under the vast Kansas sky, they had claimed their right to determine their own destiny. Inside the house, Dove began softly singing a lullaby, the same Cherokee melody Sarah had come to love during summer evenings. But now, to her surprise, Little Creek joined in with English words Sarah had taught her. The blended song drifted out into the night, two traditions becoming something new, something unique to this unlikely family that had found each other against all odds. "Listen," Sarah whispered. "That's our answer to Peterson and all the others. That's the future." Eagle Feather's arm encircled her shoulders, his expression peaceful as he gazed up at the stars. "Yes," he agreed. "That is our strength. Not Cherokee, not white, but something the land itself has brought together." As the harvest moon continued its arc across the sky, the farmhouse stood as a beacon of possibility, proof that even in a divided nation still healing from war, love could take root and flourish in the most unexpected places.